I will literally die with this business, which is maybe intense, but that's just how like passionate and committed I am to it. I've never grown a plant before. I had no idea how to have a garden, let alone a greenhouse or a vertical farm. It was actually 2021 when I quit my job and I was like, hey, this is it. I see the vision. I have no idea how I'm going to get there. I'm going to quit and just go do this now. My boss at the time was like, I don't think you should do this. You're walking into this field all alone with no team and no plan.
I used to work a 9 to 5. I always had this thought in the back of my mind of like, I'm just not where I'm supposed to be.
That's very similar to how I was feeling. I didn't know exactly what little greenhouse that could was going to look like, but I just knew I wanted to be in the greenhouse space. I only had like $10,000 in my bank account. So I was like, I'm going to live off this $10,000 and let's see how far I can get. Spoiler alert, the $10,000 didn't last long. It's a whole like vision of turning Winnipeg into like this vertical farming capital of the world. I just thought, go big, go home. I love Winnipeg. I love Manitoba. I think the work part was hard, but the harder part was just being on my own and doing it all, feeling really isolated because of that. So it was really hard, but I'm glad that I made it. The majority of people won't take the leap when I really think that a lot of them should.
All right. Welcome, Trina, to the Inspired Idiot Show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk with you today. I feel like we could have a whole other conversation about, building greenhouses specifically and what we want to do. But I really want to focus on your journey because I think you have a really cool story to tell. But I want to start by just kind of giving people a bit of a preface as to who you are. So if, like, let's say somebody asks you, like, at a dinner party, what you do, what would you say?
Oh, that's a good way to phrase that question. I would say, I'm a biosystems engineer and I own a company called Little Greenhouse That Could. So what we do is we help people who really want to start up a greenhouse, but, have no idea how to do it. We help them walk through all the phases that they need to get a greenhouse up and running. So a lot of the things that we do is we help people like through a phase one set of services. We help them with their business plans, their designs, help them figure out what would work for a greenhouse, how their greenhouse will make money, all of those kinds of things. But the whole, reasoning why we do all this work is to really just try to get more greenhouses up and running, here in Manitoba, in Canada, eventually all over the world.
Nice. I love it. Big mission.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
It all started just because like during COVID, there was just so many fires. And I graduated during COVID, working as an environmental engineer. And I really thought, how, you know, how do I do work that contributes to making like a sustainable planet? And while I was working, as an environmental engineer, I didn't think like that the work that I was doing was making as big of a difference. And that's where I thought, well, greenhouses, for growing more food with less resources all year round in a resilient way, that would be, a really cool way to make a long-term difference, which is, what kind of led to starting up the company.
Yeah, so that was actually the post that I saw that first got me connected with you was one, I think it was on your Instagram, where you were basically telling the story of like, it was 2020, you're working as an environmental engineer. I think you said that like you were looking out your office window, like in your cubicle or something, and just thinking like, man, I wish there were greenhouses everywhere. And then 6 years later, you're now trying to make Winnipeg the vertical farming capital of the world. So can you kind of walk me through, like, how did that one thought become this huge mission?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So that one thought, I guess it was kind of from, I guess it probably kind of stemmed a bit from anxiety, being like, oh my gosh, what is in the news all the time? The planet is falling apart. There's so many fires. I'm like wanting to make a difference, but I'm just like sitting behind my computer typing as I see like smoke just like covering the city and these like one little tree outside dying. Like, I feel like I'm not doing anything to make a difference and the world is like kind of falling apart. So I do definitely think I got a little anxious just from like all of the news on climate change and whatnot. But at the same time, I always just like really wanted to make a difference. And I don't really know what it was about greenhouses that really triggered like the light bulb moment where it was like, aha, if we had more greenhouses, this would be like a really key solution. It might have been from that documentary done by David Attenborough. I don't know if you did you watch that documentary at all where he talks about the effects of climate change and then talks about the solutions.
I think that I did. I've watched so much of David Attenborough's um what was the show that he always did? Was it Planet Earth? Was that his show? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just everybody knows his voice.
Yeah. Well, he did one on climate change as well, and was just talking about how the planet has changed, ever since he started filming Planet Earth up until now. He was just talking about all the changes that he's seen, and he was kind of like projecting what more changes are going to happen if we don't like change course on how we live and whatnot. So it was a really like kind of intense, documentary until the very end where he was talking about, potential solutions. And in the end point, he was like highlighting some greenhouses growing like all these food. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is so interesting that this can be done. And at that point, I had never really seen a commercial greenhouse or like knew what a commercial greenhouse was. But I just thought, I really want to learn more about that, and I really want to see more of that everywhere where I am. And yeah, and then the whole, like, vision of turning Winnipeg into, like, this vertical farming capital of the world. I just thought, go big, go home. I love Winnipeg, I love Manitoba. If we can get more greenhouses and, potentially more vertical farms started locally, then, like, it would be amazing to, be leaders in this field and have people from, like, all across the world come travel to Manitoba and Winnipeg to learn about this field. And that was all, like, stemmed from, anytime that I felt like, one of my friends or family, like, really wanted to be a leader in their field, they were, traveling outside of Winnipeg, going elsewhere to, like, gain those opportunities. And so I really wanted to do something where I'm bringing opportunities to where I live. And so it all just kind of clicked together like, we need to do something positive. Greenhouses, like, I think would be a really long term solution for food security, resource wise. And then three, I really want to help make the city and like the province I live in a much better place. And yeah, I thought by doing this route, I could hopefully help build up the industry here, and then people would start traveling here to learn about this field instead of leaving elsewhere. So it was actually 2021 when I quit my job and I was like, hey, this is it. I see the vision. I have no idea how I'm going to get there. I'm going to quit and just go do this now. And my boss at the time was like, I don't think you should do this. Like, you're walking into this, field all alone with no team and no plan. And I don't think he like meant it in um a bad way or anything. I think he was just really trying to get me to like think through the decision that I was making. But I was just like, no, whatever it is, I need to do this. I'm doing it. And so then I took that like first leap at the end of 2021. And then getting up until now, it's been um, a lot of work and research. So I started with like getting my master's in biosystems engineering, learning more about vertical farming and controlled environment ag, designing, building a vertical farm, growing food, testing yields, inputs, and outputs. I worked as a mechanical engineer for a bit as well, and I just kind of casually grew little greenhouse I could on the side. I was getting my master's, I was working full time as a mechanical engineer, and I was, you know, slowly building little greenhouse that could just by like selling indoor growing systems to people and kind of doing like really small scale, workshops and whatnot. But as, time went on, I started to get more involved with the industry and, more aware of greenhouse design and construction. And I started taking on bigger contracts, like for doing commercial greenhouse design and business planning. And that's kind of, and so I started doing Little Greenhouse That Could full time a year ago, and where we've primarily been focused on commercial greenhouse projects. So I guess that's kind of the timeline. It was just, started out of a little bit of fear, but also a deep motivation to like make this world a better place through greenhouses. And yeah, I made that big leap, spent a lot of time learning, various things while slowly building the business. And now it's gotten to a point where we can do it full time and we're growing.
It's amazing. I didn't know that you were doing it full time now, but that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
That's
you.
awesome. Yeah, what you were talking about there of like it basically started with like a seed of anxiety within you was
Hmm.
I remember you yeah, that's kind of the feeling that I got when I saw that post because instantly saw myself in that same position where I used to work a 9 to 5 and I just felt like I was appreciative of the job that I had, but like every single day I always had this thought in the back of my mind of like I'm just not where I'm supposed to be. Like I just felt
Yeah.
like I was trying to fit myself into a box that I was like, this is not I didn't even know like what kind of impact I wanted to have, but I just
Hmm.
always had that thought of like, I'm in the wrong spot. And the fact that you just took that initiative and you're like, I'm just going to go do it. And then you also got like some discouragement from your boss, you said. Like I think that's something that a lot of especially new entrepreneurs like that would be enough to stop somebody if they're feeling unsure of themselves to have somebody who's like kind of a superior figure to them in a way say like, hey, I don't think you should do this, and you fully just like embrace that inspired idiot's mindset of like, yeah, maybe not, but I think I can
I'm gonna go
figure it
do
out.
it. Yeah.
Oh my
What did
gosh.
you when you were feeling like you were in a box, like, what did you do to get out of that feeling? Um,
Honestly, the company that I worked for ended up completely closing down shortly after the pandemic. And that was like the first time in my life where I felt like I was getting like a sign from the universe. Because, like I said, I'd been feeling that way for so long. I didn't like hate the job by any means. I was actually surprised that I got the job. So I felt like I was constantly trying to tell myself like be grateful, like you're just going through a phase right now, like maybe you'll get over this, but I always just had that feeling like I'm like I feel like I'm meant to do something more. Like I feel like I want to impact people more. I don't know what it looks like yet. And then they basically brought all like 100 plus employees onto a Zoom call at once and just fired everybody, and they're like, yeah, we're done. The company is done. And as much as it was like scary and I was like angry and I felt like I'd been lied to and all the things, I just had this like knowing. I was like, I feel like the universe is like pushing me out the door right now. Like, hey, you've been feeling this way. You weren't going on your own. So like we're making you go. And it wasn't even in my mind for a second to go get another job. Like my boyfriend at the time had wanted to like partner up with me. He's now my husband and we've now been running our business for I think going on 5 years, and it just felt like that was like the push I needed to like go find my path.
wow. So the point that, like, you got fired to the point where you and your boyfriend, now husband, started up your own company, like, what was there a delay at all in between you guys doing your own thing, or did you jump into that right away?
We jumped in right away because he'd been an entrepreneur for a couple years. Like we both pursued like social media marketing. I went the corporate route and he went
Mm.
entrepreneurial. So he was a consultant. Brands would basically hire him to help them grow their Instagram accounts. And he was like, well, just come on with me and like, we'll figure it out. And
Aw.
yeah, so we basically just joined forces and we were like social media managers. We would like consult for some companies. And then we basically did a program that taught us specifically how to get customers for local businesses. And so that's what we focused on. It definitely wasn't all like smooth sailing. There was probably like a 6 month period where we were literally making no money. So I don't ever want to give people the impression that, like, yeah, I lost my job and we just started this business and it was like totally fine. Like, we definitely went through a phase that I think most people would have had a really hard time sticking it out through. But it was kind of like what you said, like we just knew we're like, yeah, it's really hard right now, but like we believe that we're gonna just figure something out. Like we'll get scrappy if we have to, you know, and that's really all we did. We just figured it out.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, like, when you're in that position where you're feeling, like, trapped in a box and you don't know where it is that you need to be, but you know it's not there, I feel like that's very similar to how I was feeling, as well. And even with like the greenhouse side of things, like I didn't know exactly what little greenhouse that could was going to look like, or, what we were going to offer, what we were going to do. But I just knew I wanted to be in the greenhouse space. And that was enough to be like, hey, this is like who I am now. Like, I'm going to figure this out no matter what. But, just as you had like that 6-month period where you weren't paying yourself, I had, a couple of years where it was like, this business isn't really isn't making me money, but I'm just like slowly building it on the side because I believe so much in the vision and the, idea of like having more greenhouses around. So I think like for people, I'm glad to hear that like you took getting fired as a sign from the universe because if the easier thing probably would have been just to get another job. But I hope that like when people hear, stories from inspired idiots or, any entrepreneur that you interview, I hope people like really understand that being in, that trapped in box is something very common that lots of people feel, and not knowing where to start or how to do anything is also, very common with other people, with how other people feel, but you just have to take that risk sometimes. And you just have to take that jump if you believe in it so deeply.
Yeah.
I hope that's like what, I really hope long term, Low Greenhouse that could, well, I know it will be like a much bigger company, as we're growing and scaling and whatnot. But I hope like I can one day like help people get out of those boxes and into, their own thing and just get comfortable with taking on that risk because it's something that so many people feel, but the majority of people won't take the leap when I really think that a lot of them should.
Yeah, I completely wholeheartedly agree. And something you said there before that I also really resonated with was you made the conscious decision that you're like, okay, I know that what I want to do is something around greenhouses. So what made you decide to stay in Winnipeg and do that? Because I'm sure I would imagine at some point in your journey, did you ever get encouraged by people that like, okay, if you want to do this, like you should probably move and go somewhere else? Like what made you see that no, the opportunity is actually to do this in Winnipeg, in Manitoba?
So I think that was more just me being stubborn and like I really love Winnipeg. I really love Manitoba. My family's here, all my friends are here. And I know lots of people make fun of Winnipeg, myself included. It's like, oh, Winnipeg, like what's going on there? But to me, I'm a really like community, family, friend oriented person. And so to me, like the real reward is like making the world around you better. And so I just really wanted to make the world around me better. And so that always meant staying and like building what I really wanted to see here locally first and then branching outwards. So I wouldn't say it was, a strategic decision where there wasn't any greenhouses. So there's lots more opportunity to build greenhouses here. It was very much so like um an emotional decision where this is like my home, this is where I feel connected to. I want to make the change here first and then branch out, even if it takes a little longer. And then also I had no idea where the greenhouse industry was. Like I knew it was in the Netherlands and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to move to the Netherlands. Like that's just a little too far for me. But I didn't at the time realize that there's such a dominant greenhouse industry in Southern Ontario and in Leamington. So had I known that at the time that I decided to quit, I probably still wouldn't have moved. But I might have considered it a bit more.
Yeah, that was a big motivator for us as well, is our families are here, our roots are here. But the other thing too that a lot of people don't realize, and I interviewed Dean Sofer, who runs a YouTube channel called Arcopia. So he built his own passive solar greenhouse in Saskatchewan, and he's grown a very big YouTube channel around it because he's like, I grow bananas in, cold Canadian winters. And he talked about this a lot as well. He's like, people don't realize that the climate we live in or the place that we live in is actually kind of great for having greenhouses because we get so much sunlight and we're like in the
Yeah.
prairies and it's flat. So yeah, it's cold, but if you just learn how to build these structures the right way, you can actually get some pretty great yields because of all the sunlight that we get.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd also say that there's like a lot bigger of a market opportunity as well, since like that greenhouse sector isn't as saturated here. Like
Mm.
in Leamington, there's been so many greenhouse builds that now municipalities are putting restrictions on new greenhouse construction projects in that area, just because there's so many of them that a lot of power and heat and resources are put towards the greenhouses. So now, like, there's some frustration with some members in the municipalities and the greenhouse sector. But here in Manitoba, like, there's not much of an industry for it. So it does mean that there's a lot more opportunity for people to get into this industry and, you know, kind of still be in a market that's not saturated.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see that. So can you kind of take me back, like when you talked about how you walked away from that job to start this business to help people build greenhouses? What I know you said like that first conversation that you had with your boss when you were leaving was a little bit discouraging, but what did the next like 6 months look like for you? Like what did that decision feel like?
Oh, well, yeah. The next 6 months were very chaotic. So, I mean, I've never grown a plant before. I had no idea like how to have a garden, let alone a greenhouse or a vertical farm. So I decided, and I only had like $10,000 in my bank account. So I was like, I'm gonna, live off this $10,000 and let's see how far I can get. Spoiler alert, the $10,000 didn't last long. So, um, I decided that I was going to go get my master's, in biosystems engineering, just because, like, the thought process was, well, as a student, I could get some resources to, potentially build, like, a prototype of something that I could sell, and then I can also learn about this field and, get paid a little bit for it while I'm doing it. And I'm also like building up my credibility. So I went and got my master's. I registered for my master's, and it was on creating an energy model for a vertical farm. Um, so I did that, and the next that whole 6 months, I just started learning about entrepreneurship and businesses just in general. So I took a few entrepreneurship classes. I studied uh, like a business model canvas. I did a ton of, customer interviews on the greenhouse space in general, tried to figure out where greenhouses could fit or where vertical farm could fit, who would want to buy it. I just learned, general business terms. I learned what a business plan was. I did all of this just to kind of get a direction on where should I start this company. Because, a lot of people, they would ask me, well, what does your business do? And I'd say, our vision's to get greenhouses and vertical farms everywhere. And so there wasn't a tangible thing that we were doing or that we were offering or selling that provided anybody value. So it took a while until I could actually figure out that starting point of, okay, this is what we sell. This is the value that we're creating. And this is how we make money based off of that value. So getting to that point, it honestly took me like 8 or 9 months to just like register the business and, say exactly what it was that we were doing. And so that starting point was just selling indoor growing systems. So I had two indoor growing systems I was going to sell. One was like a countertop unit, and the other was a vertical grow wall. And that was just the starting point. I'm just going to sell these two indoor growing systems. But yeah, so that whole 6 months, it was learning a ton about entrepreneurship, business model, and this business planning information. And at the same time, I was also studying vertical farming a ton. So, looking at what nutrients people are using, what recipes are working, what's the right, temperature, humidity, VPD conditions for plants, what's the right amount of airflow that plants need, all like the science part of it. So, yeah, it's always been a balance of what is the science behind getting a plant to grow and learning about that. And then at the same time, what is a business and how do you get a business to grow? So learning both of those skills at the same time for like 6 to 8 months. So yeah, so I started just with like living off of my savings for as long as I could, getting my master's, and then I actually ended up serving for another year. I used to serve when I was, getting my undergrad, but once I graduated, I quit. So I went back to it for a full year as I was doing my master's and building this business, up until the point where I started working as a mechanical design engineer for 2 years. And then I did my business. But yeah, that was the 6 months.
Wow. Serving as in like waitressing?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I gotcha. Wow. So do you feel like in that first period, like were you in, like, I know you said you had a bit of money in your bank account, so you're like, I'm okay for right now. Do you feel like you were in a position where like this could fail and like you'd be fine? Or was it like, no, this has to work territory?
So that's a good question. I would say the mindset has always been this is going to work no matter what. And that's still the mindset that I have today is no matter what, this is working. I told one of the girls that she works part time for me yesterday when we were driving home from community engagement. I told her I will literally die with this business, which is which is maybe intense, but that's just how like passionate and committed I am to it. So at that 6 month period, I would say that, you know, there was a part of me that was like, okay, if this fails, I can go back, to be a waitress, start over, figure it out. But that thought was like buried really far down deep. And it was just kind of like shushed by no matter what, this is working. And that was the mindset. And that's still the
Nice.
mindset today. And I honestly
Yeah.
think you kind of have to have that mindset to make something work.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's, it's not always going to be easy. There's going to be pivots and there might be times when you're like you quit your job and then you went back and got another job at one point, but you never gave up on this. It might look different during phases, but you're like, I'm in this for like the long term.
Yeah, exactly. And like there's a difference too between quitting and pivoting. Pivoting is very normal. Every business owner always has to pivot. And so as long as you're comfortable with pivoting, but you have the mindset that I'm never going to give up on this and that this is going to work no matter what, then pivoting becomes like just a really useful tool for you to
Mhm.
get like, the outcomes that you're going for.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's really key. Yeah, you said that really well. You said something there that I think a lot of entrepreneurs would relate to as well. Like you said that you'd never even like grown a plant. You didn't really know much about greenhouses or vertical farms when you started. So how did you get to a point where you decided that you were ready to take on paid clients?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I started getting confidence with taking on paid clients once I was actually using the indoor growing systems that, I was selling and I was growing plants and I could prove that I could grow a full plant cycle and I could prove the yields and whatnot. So I think like once I had that hands-on experience, it actually did make it a lot easier because then I would, sell people some equipment. I would offer that like long-term training support. And I knew that they would be successful because, what I was doing, it was working, and I was successful with it. And I knew that, we could just tweak some things to help certain people out. So yeah, I definitely gained more confidence as I started doing like my own growing.
Yeah, I think that's actually like kind of the key to sales because I've talked with probably I would guess probably somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 people who say they want to start their own business. And probably the most common fear that I hear from people is like the selling part of it. They're like, I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to be like the pushy salesman or whatever. And the lesson that I've learned there that I always tell people is like when you're selling something that you actually believe in, though, because like you've seen it work or you're like aligned with the mission of that product or service, that's like what does the selling for you. So you just exemplified that. You're like, once I actually saw these things work and I had conviction in like what they would do for people, that's what enabled you to sell those products.
Yeah, I think you really have to believe in what you're offering and the value that you're creating.
Mhm. So how did you like was that you started learning about greenhouses and vertical farming? Were those indoor growing systems, were those like products that you were basically kind of like a middleman for, or how did you start selling those products?
Yes, I was definitely like a middle person for that. The countertop units, it was some guy who had, made these countertop units and was selling them for like a year or 2 years and then stopped. And I honestly can't even remember how I got introduced to him, but I didn't sell those units for too long. Like a lot of them leaked. So it just turned out to like not be the best option. And the walls, I still sell the walls today. And I got introduced to William Aitken, who is the director of Harvest Today Canada. He's a great, great person to know, very grateful for the relationship I have with him. He's very hands-on with like any client who buys, a Harvest Today wall. But I got introduced to him at the University of Manitoba because he was pitching his new grow walls. And so we started using those grow walls at the U of M, the smart farm that I had built and designed. And yeah, and so that's how I got introduced to him and the countertop units. And yeah, I would just put in an order. I would sell them, put in an order to, the suppliers. Suppliers would make them. I'd set them up at people's homes and then I'd teach them, I'd show them how to use it. And then offer like a long-term training support setup. So I would video call, once a week when people were using the walls to make sure everything was going well.
Nice. So it's like a green wall that you'll see
Yeah.
in some buildings. Nice. Okay. And then how did you go from, okay, you start by strictly selling those products to now it sounds like you guys offer a much more comprehensive service for people that want to build greenhouses. So can you walk me through like how you went from one to the other?
Yeah. So, the vision, it was like another light bulb moment for me. When I was working with my clients in Alberta, they have a cattle farm. They really wanted to do a greenhouse to add another revenue stream to their business. And so I always knew that long term, I wanted to be in the greenhouse sector. But I just thought with starting with, vertical farming and indoor growing units, it would be an easier way to transition into the greenhouse sector just because there's slightly less variables you're dealing with a vertical farm. You're not dealing with sunlight, so the humidity, temperature, light conditions are a bit more stable. Um, so I just thought it was easier to start with indoor growing systems in vertical farm. So once I was able to transition into the greenhouse world, when I had an opportunity to work with this family in Alberta on their greenhouse plans. So I started with them just with preliminary design work, evaluating different ways to grow lettuce. Like, is a moving gutter system better? Is a hydronic pond system better, like a deep water culture pond. Gutter systems where they're not moving and not automated, is that better? So I was just looking at all these different technology options and assessing, which one made the most sense based on how many people you needed to run the farm, how much the initial capital was, and what would be your potential return on investment. But where we got stuck after doing all this, technical assessment and preliminary design work is that the clients really needed, the right business partner. And knowing who the right business partner would be, that is something that should have been thought out on a business plan side of things. So once I realized that, like, yes, this preliminary design, this technical assessment, that adds a lot of value, but to add even more value to people to make sure that their greenhouses get started, we really need to be looking at the business planning side of things and to make sure that their operations are set up correctly. They have the right partnerships. They know who they're selling to. So the transition to commercial greenhouse projects, it happened because I got a really great opportunity to work with this awesome family in Alberta who I still work with, and I'm so grateful, for all of the work that they've given me. And it's also came with, that aha moment where, okay, engineering design's really important to people, but what's really going to make a decision on whether someone pursues a greenhouse project is, does the business plan make sense? And does this financially make sense to do? Which is how we got started into the business planning side of things.
Gotcha. And do you focus specifically on commercial greenhouses where like their source of revenue is producing and selling food, or are there other types of greenhouse businesses as well?
That's the majority of what we're focused on. We are looking at potential opportunity of, a multi-purpose greenhouse project where food generation is one of them, but potentially there's a farmer's market included with it, or there's a food hub. So we are, if we get the opportunity to work on this project, we will, branch out and look at this as well because it's within the same stream of the kinds of projects Little Greenhouse That Kid wants to be involved with.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So I wanted to go back to something you said before. You said that there was a point where you were running the little greenhouse that could on the side. You had a job, I believe, in engineering. You were also working on your master's. So though it sounds like there was a point where those three things were all overlapping, which sounds intense. So when you were in that phase, what did like an average week look like for you?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so an average week, it would be like get up, work on, some business initiatives, um, online before I go to my job, then 9 to 5, work in my job. And then right after 5, I'd have to get to the U of M and work on the farm. And so like harvest plants, check in on everything. And then after that, get home at like 7, let's say, and like do a little bit more like website design work, maybe work on my thesis and then go to bed. So it was very intense for like 2 years, I would say, of, not taking any weekends, working, way more than 8 hours a day. But that intense period now I have, like, a lot more balance because I'm able to do Little Greenhouse That I could full time and my master's is done, and all that. So, the grind, it was really intense, and it was also not as enjoyable as the work that I'm doing now because it was still a lot of the foundational work of, like, setting up what your business is going to look like, what are you going to offer, those types of things. Now we actually have really good projects that we're working on. I've got great relationships with all the clients that we're working with. It's a lot more like business development, relationship building kind of work that I'm doing. And I have people to help me with some of the other, tasks that we're doing. So now it's like a lot more enjoyable. But for those 2 years, it was a lot of work that I had to do by myself, which was really hard. Yeah. So I think the work part was hard, but the harder part was just being on my own and doing it all. And feeling really isolated because of that. So yeah, it was really hard, but I'm glad that I made it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that that isolation in the early years of entrepreneurship is like what gets in the way for a lot of people. And that was a big driver of like why I wanted to make this content because when you are in that phase of like, feeling like an inspired idiot and you're like, man, I feel like the people around me don't really get what I'm doing. And like I
Mhm.
think that, my parents or my friends would probably breathe a sigh of relief if I just like went and got another job. And like, it's really easy for those thoughts of like, can I actually do this to creep in, even
Yes.
when you know you can? So I think putting out content like this and telling people stories of like, yeah, I went through that too. And like, it was all worth it. Like sometimes you just need to see that somebody else did it to know that like there is a light at the end of this tunnel. I'm just going through it right now.
Yeah, that is very, very true. I think the work that you're doing is so important to inspire other people to make the same jump because like, while I was going through that 2-year period of intense work, I honestly would start looking for inspirational stories of like successful people who did make it. Um, who are in because you're looking for something to be inspired by to keep going. Because there's some points where you're like, does it ever get better? Like, did the choice that I make, was this the right one? Like, even though I have this great vision, am I even going to be happy doing this long term? That was a thought that came up a lot is, I really have this great vision, but I also want to be happy. And if it's going to be like this for the rest of my life, I don't know if this was the right decision. But if I had known what it was like now to be doing the work that I am now, I wouldn't have had those thoughts at all. And I think like something that business owners say a lot, I would ask business owners, I ask, does it ever get better? And a lot of people would say no. And I think they were saying no because they assumed that I was asking if you ever like reach the goalpost. And with every business owner, the goalpost always moves. Like that's just a very, common theme. But
Mhm.
there is a point where you're working on it by yourself. You're completely isolated. You're not making any money. And that starting point sucks. And it really does suck. But I do actually think that it does get better once you get through that starting point. It's just not a lot of people know that.
Yeah, yeah. If it was super easy, then like everybody would do it. But I think when you're going through that phase of like it's feeling like a grind and you're kind of questioning yourself, the thing that I would often remind myself of is like, well, I just have to trust that I'm gonna figure it out. Like that's all I have to do. I don't have to believe right now that like, how long is it gonna take or anything. I
Yeah.
just need to know that I have enough faith in myself that I have the ability to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think faith in yourself is really important. And I would call that confidence. Like you have to be like confident in yourself that you have the capabilities to figure it out.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I've taught, what I try to tell like any, younger person who's like asking me for advice now. I say number one thing that you have to work on is confidence. You don't have to be confident that you know everything, but you have to be confident in yourself that you're going to be able to figure out what you need to figure out when the challenges come to you.
Yeah. And I think specifically adding on to that, like a fear that I hear from a lot of really new entrepreneurs is like the fear of like not having all the answers. Like they think that being confident means like knowing everything. And they're like, well, I can't start working with clients or I can't call this person until I know like every answer to any question that they might ask. And I honestly think one of the most powerful lessons that I learned in that early phase was just getting comfortable saying like, you know what? I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I will get an answer for you by the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then
So,
I think that builds trust with clients too, because you're being honest about what you don't know. And if you can also live up to whatever timeline you set for them, you're building trust two times there. Once when you're admitting what you don't know, and two by following through and answering their questions in the timeline that you set. So I think that's
yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's such a simple little business hack I found. So you've talked about a couple of the types of clients that you've worked with. Like you had the family who had a cattle ranch and wanted to get into building their own greenhouse. So what's in your experience, like what kind of person decides I'm going to build a vertical farm? Like who are the people that often become your clients?
So a lot of First Nations are really interested in doing commercial greenhouses for their community. And those are the client. I mean, I love all my clients. Um, but the First Nations are really exciting to work with because it generates revenue for their community and it provides an opportunity for jobs. So that's super meaningful. Those are definitely, a big portion of people who want to do these greenhouses. Another one would be someone, yeah, like the cow family that I'm working with wants to add another revenue stream to their business and already has a history of agriculture business in their portfolios. And then the third I'd say is a lot of people who are really fed up with their jobs and want to do something more meaningful and grow food. And so those people I find are, our CSA farmers, our small mom and pop shop farmers. So
And what
those
does
are the
CSA
types of
mean?
people. Community supported agriculture program. So like you'll do a mom and pop shop style of vertical farm and sell produce to like their local community.
Nice. And I don't know if you would even be able to answer this question, but you might have more insights than I do. I'm sure that these projects vary dramatically based on like the scope and like how big the structure is and stuff like that. But do you have any knowledge on like when somebody, let's say, starts a commercial greenhouse business? Like they're like, I want to grow food and I want to sell it. Is there any kind of expectation somebody could have in terms of like from when they get the greenhouse up to when they are able to actually like make it pay for itself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it depends on the crop. So, an automated leafy green greenhouse would maybe have an ROI period of 6 to 7 years to have it like pay for itself. Small scale vertical farm might be 2 years to pay for itself. A large, let's say, tomato greenhouse, actually, I don't know exactly how many years that would be. I haven't done the financial projections on tomatoes. But yeah, I think it really depends on the crop and what kind of investment you're putting into the greenhouse.
Hmm. So there are some crops that in general are more profitable than others?
Yeah, I would
Nice.
I would say more profitable, so long as the market is accessible.
Okay. And how would they like, is that just like the local market in their area? Like what's in demand?
Um, Local market in their area, but also retailers. So, for example, there's lots of lettuce farmers that have started up. Um, there's not like a okay, so Little Leaf Farms, that's like the biggest lettuce greenhouse in North America. So they're a major player in year-round lettuce production. Haven Greens is another really good year-round lettuce greenhouse operator. Then there's Good Leaf, there's Up Vertical. There's a lot of like smaller players that are in the retailers already. But there's so many of the smaller players that even though their production maybe is not matching what the retailers are going to sell. Since there's so many of them, retailers are ideally going to want to work with the same lettuce provider that they already have and work with them as they expand rather than sign on a bunch of contracts with a bunch of suppliers. So even though there might be more demand for lettuce, it might not be as easy for you to get into the retailers because there's so many players that they might already have a contract with somebody else. So
Mm,
that's what I mean by market accessibility, but it's going to vary depending on crop and who you want to sell to.
okay. And this is all part of kind of what you would help somebody
Mhm.
figure out in getting the business going.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. This makes so much more sense now. Interesting. Okay. So one of the things that really, really stood out to me when I first reached out to you and I was looking at like other content you guys have put out there is, like I've said to you, I really love interviewing people who have, quote unquote, like unrealistic goals and they're committed to actually making them happen. And your goal of making Winnipeg the vertical farming capital of the world definitely fits that. I'm curious, like what made you decide to like say it out loud and share that with people as opposed to just like working on it quietly?
That's a great question. I think I just got so excited about this vision that I just started sharing it with everybody and not really like thinking about, yeah, how hard might this like actually be to do this. But I always like I still think if we set this big target, like maybe, I'm aiming for that target, but like how cool you have to have a big vision. You have to have something that's like bigger than yourself to be inspired by, to keep working towards. And I don't think having one greenhouse in Winnipeg is that inspiring. I think having 30, having like the best university program that could in the entire world on greenhouse design and construction and controlled environment ag, having the best like um micro credential courses being hosted here in Winnipeg, having the most prominent, indigenous greenhouse production set up in all of North America here in Winnipeg. I think all of those things, that's really cool. That's super inspiring. And like, that's worth putting in all the blood, sweat, and tears and all like the, really um boring days, the nonchalant days, thinking about, well, what if we could do that? I think working towards that is what keeps me going. So, yeah, what got me to share this with everyone? I don't know. I just got really excited about it and I started sharing it. And even when I think about it again today, I think, yeah, that would be so cool. Like we need to keep going towards that. So it's definitely how it keeps me motivated.
Yeah. I love it. I felt the exact same way when we first started posting about like our goal of like we want to grow a big tropical greenhouse. And when we started posting it, somebody was like, "Well, like shouldn't you just post about it once it's like done? Like what if you make
No.
all this content and you share it and then it doesn't happen?" I'm like, "It is going to happen though." And I'm a very big believer that like if I want something to be real, I need to act like it's going to be real, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And like when you share a vision that's like about like something more than yourself that other people can get involved in, it makes it more easy for people that I want to support that, and it's like something that like lots of people like could get involved in, and it like creates this like little ball of excitement. And I feel like with business, like, yeah, there are some great days that I have now, like some great days where I'm doing tours with clients, like we're checking out all these really innovative greenhouses. They're really interested in doing something, but there's a lot of boring days where you're just behind, this the screen, like doing another proposal, sending out another quote that you think, yeah, you're probably not going to hear back from this quote that you send out. There's a lot of boring and discouraging days. So I think like you need to have something that keeps you really excited and motivated, and you need to share that because you need the people around you to know that like this business is growing and this business is going forward because that's how people will believe in you.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you, 100,000%. So I know you said it was 2021 when you first left your job and you first started the little greenhouse that could. Didn't really have an idea of what was going to happen. It's 2026 now. Where is the company at today?
So we mostly work on commercial greenhouse projects. So a lot of the clients that we work with are in this phase one set of services. I think I mentioned that earlier. So we're working with First Nations, we're working with, existing ag business owners, that family in Alberta. And we're also really involved with this mushroom company that's it locally in Winnipeg. We're going to be growing lion's mane and oysters. So we'll actually have lion's mane mushroom for sale very, very soon. And we're going to be looking to, sell these lion's mane mushrooms and these
Nice.
oyster mushrooms. It's Little greenhouse like it's definitely growing and gaining traction. I'm doing it full time. I have, one girl working with me part time. We've got people doing some other things for us. Um, but that's kind of where we're at today. We're definitely going to be growing this year, just with like more projects that we're taking on. And yeah, I'm just enjoying the ride. I'm hoping that we can build our own greenhouse, hopefully in like the next, year or so.
Nice. Yeah, you got to have your own greenhouse at some point.
Hmm. Hmm.
Nice. That's so exciting. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's awesome.
It's a grind, but it's definitely enjoyable.
Yeah. And I mean you're coming out the other side of the grind. I'm sure the work never stops, but it sounds like you've gotten to a place where you're like, "Oh man, those 2 years of just working all day every day have gotten me to this place." And it sounds like you're pretty happy with the place that you're at right now.
Yes, yeah, I would say so. Like there's some days where I'm still like the goalpost for so long was to get to the point where I'm at now. And once I got to that point, it immediately moved. So there's so many days where I'm like, oh, I'm not at this point yet. But I'm definitely a lot happier with the day-to-day things that we're working on and where things are going. I would say for sure I'm very happy with the company.
Nice. That's amazing. I love to hear that. The that kind of leads very good into my last question. The thing that I always like to ask people, and I guess in this case, if somebody, let's say, is like watching this video in their cubicle right now and they're feeling kind of how you and I used to feel, um, like they want to have more of an impact, they want to do something a little bit bigger, what is one thing that you would tell those people?
Just do it. Don't hesitate, just take the leap. Even if you don't have a plan or everything figured out, you just have to believe in yourself, and take that leap and keep going. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Simple. That's a good note to
Yeah,
end
I
it on.
know. I hate to quote Nike, but literally just do it.
Just do it. Just do it and just figure it out one step at a time.
Hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, well that's a perfect note to end it on. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording, but I just wanted to say again, thank you for coming on today and sharing your story. And it was really cool to hear a little bit of the behind the scenes from building Little Greenhouse That Could.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been very enjoyable, and you've definitely reignited my passion because I've been feeling sick all day, and now I feel a lot better.
Yay! I love that. All right, that is a perfect note to end it on.